Wolfman is the newest Blumhouse reimagining of the Universal horror monster, this time coming from Leigh Whannell, director of 2019's The Invisible Man, Insidious Chapter 3, and Upgrade, starring Christopher Abbott and an ever-controversial creature design. Since its inception, I've been super interested to see the Blumhouse take of the Wolfman, and it's interesting, but still very lackluster. Before we get into it, let me know what you guys thought of Wolfman in the comments down below, but right out of the gate, I absolutely love what Leigh Whannell is able to do with the atmosphere of all of his films, and this one is no different. From the opening, we truly get to understand this world, why Christopher Abbott's character is the way he is to himself, the way he treats his daughter, his wife, everyone in his life. Everything feels truly meditative, and this really ambitious world that we're trying to build around these very personal characters, all of it works because there is just so much aura to the atmosphere of this film. I think there's one essential flaw with this movie, but I think that the atmosphere itself carries a lot of it, and at times makes me forget about this one essential problem, which I'll mention in just a second here. As I mentioned before in the opening of this film, we follow a younger version of Christopher Abbott's character, and I think it is really, really well done. It's super slow, and at one point I caught myself saying, do we really need this long of an opening? But then as the movie goes on, you really do understand why it's so important and why it's so essential. And I think the meditative nature of the entire first half, though it might seem kind of overdone and, oh my god, I just want to see the Wolfman, I did feel that sometimes. But also, I found it really, really interesting when we got to the latter parts of the film, how it really connected back to the opening and the origins of this character. And I think a big part of that is the great pacing of this movie. I think the second act definitely drags. It's just a general creature / Blumhouse movie problem that we've been having recently, but we don't get Wolfman right away, but that transition and the way that Christopher Abbott's character evolves from this family man guy to every single action that happens, everything feels worth it and everything feels earned. I feel like a lot of that first to second act transition is just our transition of our main character turning into the Wolfman, because spoiler alert, he does. But it's really, really interesting, and the way that they play out all of these wolf senses coming into our character, it is really, really cool. And that was one thing that I was kind of scared, especially a Blumhouse movie doing that, but they did a good job. I will say the final act / the way that we're transitioning from the second act, the twist, and then getting into the third act, it didn't really work for me, and that's kind of where the film fell off the rails. But before getting into more negatives, I do want to mention on a technical level, specifically on a visual level, this movie encased so much fear into me. There's this one technique that they do, especially when they're trying to transition between what Christopher Abbott as the Wolfman is seeing and then what the family is seeing. I've never seen anything like it. I think it really adds a lot of horror elements to this that I didn't really expect. There's one sequence, and you'll know when you see it in the film, obviously, in the barn, where obviously our human characters can't see into the dark, but the Wolfman can see into the dark. And they do this pan over transition. It's absolutely beautiful. I don't want to say much more about it because it's just something you have to experience. And on a score level, there's one moment where they're running to a place and they're getting chased by something, and the score is insane. And then for some reason, they never go back to that idea, that theme, whatever you want to call it. They just do it once and never go back to it. And that kind of pissed me off because it was so cool. The movie has a really good idea of wanting to not necessarily just be a jump scare movie, but it's always so focused in building suspense on a visual level. But I also feel like it doesn't always deliver on the suspense. It feels like by the end of the movie, yeah, we get all these really cool visual techniques, which Leigh Whannell is known for, but it never translates to something palpable in the story. I do have to mention the creature design, but before I do that, I want to talk about the performance that carries this film through and through, which is Christopher Abbott, who I've been constantly mentioning throughout this video. He's absolutely amazing, and I love Christopher Abbott. He is slowly getting in more and more things. My favorite performance of him was, I think, 2 years ago in On the Count of Three. Absolutely phenomenal film with Gerard Carmichael as well. He's also in Sanctuary and Poor Things. Two really great movies in my opinion. He's so good. I don't know why he hasn't gotten, he was in Kraven the Hunters, but we don't talk about that. He's so good, and I really hope we see him in more roles. He was really great as Wolfman, especially once he got into the prosthetics and you kind of see the evolution of this character. It's so awesome. He's so charming. I'm just excited to see more of him. I think the wife and the young girl, they're not bad, but they don't add much more than Christopher Abbott is already giving us. Now, I keep mentioning this fatal flaw, and I'll get into it in a second, but I want to talk about this controversial creature design. Now, I'm not going to be revealing the creature design at all for Wolfman in this video. Universal/Blumhouse has already revealed it themselves in the final marketing. For some reason, they decided to do it, but I'm only going to be mentioning the first look that they showed off at Universal Halloween Horror Nights. So if you haven't seen that and you don't want to see it at all, you can skip to the timestamp in the description down below. But this is the picture that we got at Universal Halloween Horror Nights, which is our first look at Wolfman. And honestly, I was really disappointed. This basically confirmed that we're strictly going for like the disease version of this character, and it's not really like a wolf that is like engulfing this man. And I hate to break it to you, but that's kind of what ends up happening in the film. They take a direction with like the evolution of Wolfman and the disease idea that I really like, and it's something super unique. But when you put that final design of what Wolfman is on the screen, I look at it and I'm kind of disappointed. You know, it's not necessarily Wolfman. It's more so man that slightly resembles a wolf. And I didn't really like that. I see vision. Like I completely understand what they were going for. It just didn't really hit. Maybe we didn't get enough time with the evolution of this character. Maybe we didn't get enough time with how the idea of this Wolfman disease evolves throughout the entirety of the story and how it connects to Christopher Abbott's character, et cetera, et cetera. But obviously the final thing I want to talk about is this one fatal flaw that I've been mentioning. And it is that this movie is so narratively weak. I think the characters work to an extent. I think Christopher Abbott carries the performance aspect of this film. But there's one generic, basic ass storyline that takes you from beginning to end. Christopher Abbott loves his family. His family goes to his dad's house. Something happens. He becomes Wolfman, blah, 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 right? That's your basic Wolfman story. I'm saying blah, 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 because I don't want to give anything away. The movie's not out yet. But there is nothing more. There's just one generic thematic idea of family. That's it. Like I'm not trying to spoil anything. It's just family. And I think it works to be a basic Blumhouse movie, which it is, but it does nothing more than that. And so I can have fun with this movie. I can enjoy or not enjoy the creature design. I can think that visually it works really well and it does something unique. But when you just look at this story on a baseline level, it literally gives you nothing more than a man turning into a wolf. And maybe that's what you expect going into a Wolfman movie. But I want to see at least some other sort of thematic progression, especially if you're not going all in this really weird, campy, fully wolf man. You know, you're taking a more realistic approach. Maybe let's dive into some more realistic themes as well. At the end of the day, I didn't expect much out of Wolfman, but I was still pretty interested in the idea of Blumhouse making a Wolfman movie. But sadly, it just ends up being another average Blumhouse film. They're releasing 5 films this year, and this is going to be another one that just gets mixed in the pot of those. Overall, I'm going to give Leigh Whannell's Wolfman a 6.5 out of 10. If you've seen or want to check out this movie, let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.